Hi, in this video I'll be replacing the belts on this Jvc Kd-D55 cassette deck. The main belt is loose and it's riding off the edge on the motor pulley as well as on the flywheel pulley. The other belt was also loose. All goes well, the deck will get 2 new belts as well as a minor service with a lube of the flywheel bearings and a lube of the motor. I also set the playback speed on it and demagnetize the heads. I have removed the top cover earlier. There was 3 screws per side and 2 on the back. So let's get stuck into it. And looking at the cassette deck from the back like this, it doesn't look like there's anything that can be done from this side. I think the front fascia will have to come off. And to do that, I think these 2 screws per side will have to come out. And looking at it from underneath, I think these 2 recessed screws here, these 2, might have something to do with holding the cassette deck in place. In addition to those screws, these screws here will also have to be removed. There's one here, one there, and one down the bottom there in the corner. There's 2 missing. This one's missing, and the bottom one there is missing. So I'm thinking someone's been in there before. Let's do that. It'd also be a good idea to remove these ground wires as well to give myself a bit of room, and pop the screw back in there. Swing these cables out of the way for now. So with all these screws removed, I think I'll have to remove these 2 as well. And with that done, I did feel some tension coming off the whole chassis. But that is still not all of them. It's time to remove the cassette door itself. And there's 2 more screws inside the cassette well, just there in each corner up the top there. There's one of them. And here's the second one. And while at this stage, while everything's loose, the fascia and the cassette deck itself, nothing wants to budge. So I'm going to remove the remaining screws and take the bottom cover off. The cassette deck has this L-shaped bracket here, and the way to get to that screw there is from the bottom. It's screwed in from the bottom. With that done, let's have a look. And with that done, that gives me good access to that L-shaped bracket screw. And there's 2 more screws that hold the mechanism there. And with removing the screw from the bell-shaped bracket, try not to put too much force on it down, as you might crack the board doing that. And at this stage, the whole mechanism is loose, but it's still not ready to come out. There's still something holding it in this area here. And that was a matter of wiggling it around here. And this whole cassette mechanism is loose now. Not quite ready to come out. There's some cables that are still holding and restricting its movements, but it's almost there. Okay, so that was a bit of a master of disaster moment, but yeah, I've got the deck mechanism here all loose. It's just held up by the cables. Not all of them can be unplugged by the looks of things, but what I can do is loosen them up here, and they'll give me a bit of room to do things with it. So moving it around with the fascia loose, I had the slider knob come off. So the master of disaster moment was when I was moving it around with the fascia and everything loose. The slider knob came off, but I have found it, so that's cool. Just a quick look at the mechanism itself from this side with its three heads. Nice and clean. And a quick look from the other side. Huge massive flywheel. Sankyo motor. And it's sort of still alive. To get to the belts, it looks like I'll have to remove this bracket here. That's got holds the motor, and that would involve removing these two screws as well as that screw there on the post. So there'll be that screw there on that brass post, as well as this screw here on the board. And same would apply to this screw here. Don't apply too much pressure to it. Don't break the board. Don't crack the board. So that would be that screw looking at from the top, as well as this screw here. This screw here, I think it's retaining the bracket as well. Don't know about this screw at this stage. See how we go. I'm going to do that now. Get that bracket off with the motor so I can get to the belts. But first I'm going to get rid of this cable tie. So I've got a bit of room to swing the bracket with the motor out of the way. And here I've actually made 3 mistakes. The first mistake is I should have marked the flywheel, its orientation in the mechanism before I pulled it out. But more about that later. Anyway, that bracket's going to come off, so let's do that first. The bracket itself is secured on 4 identical screws, so let's get them out first. Second screw. And these screws are unique, so they'll be very hard to replace if lost. the third screw. And the fourth, but not the last screw. There's one more. Last screw is this one, and this one's different from the other four. And this screw is a little bit larger and a little bit different to the other four. And at this point, the bracket's only holding on by the belts. And this is the second mistake I've made. I've actually thought I turned the camera off, but it didn't turn off. It stayed on. And when I've went to turn it on, I've actually turned it off. So there's a bit of footage missing of me taking off the belts and taking out the bracket. Sorry about that. Basically, you take the belt off the flywheel and the bracket comes off. And this is what I was talking about earlier, about marking the orientation of the flywheel exactly the way it came out. I mean, I can roughly see it the way it came out in this video, excuse me. But if I had no video, then it would be a different story. And there I can see it in that video as I turned it upside down. Also, I thought I had my finger over that washer on the other side of the capstan, but yeah, that went missing. It's somewhere on the board in the deck. I've got spares, so that's not a problem, not a big issue. Alright, let's check out the new belts, and this is a part number here for the Jvc Kd-D55 flat belt RW 8.0, which is the main flat belt, and another one, the smaller belt, SCX 5.1, and the dimensions are there on there as well if you're interested in that. And just quickly again, here's the dimensions of the flat belt. So let's compare them to the old belts. Yeah, and the old belt seems a lot larger, stretched out compared to the new belt. And the other belt, this belt's also new, and this is a substitute that I found just to fix the deck temporarily, and it's a little bit thicker, but almost the absolutely correct size that that it needs. There you go, the ideal size, but it's a little bit thicker. It was just done to get the deck going. without any hiccups and test what's actually happening with it. So yeah, you can probably see here the bottom belt is the one I threw on. It's a little bit thicker than it should be. This is the correct belt for it now. So the flywheel's still pretty clean. There's not a lot to clean on it, and it'll lube on those gears maybe. Definitely some on that shaft. Otherwise it's looking good. No melted belts. And here I can show you the cam gear that I was talking about in the earlier video. In this particular deck, this is a cam gear here. Let's get a close-up of that. And it's not broken. This is how it's supposed to be. And what I think was happening, and see, this one's also got that bits missing with that hook on it, like on here. And what I think was happening here initially, where I changed the smaller belt, this one here, was this belt slippage in between the flat belt and the other smaller square belt, where these two were not running in sync, and that was causing the problems for the deck initially, I think, in my opinion. Before I put the belts on, I'm going to lightly lubricate all the gears and the capstan shaft and the motor through here as well with 5W30, I think it was, semi-synthetic or fully synthetic engine oil, and that is pretty thin oil, just a little bit thicker than water in under room temperature, and I'll use that. It's a quality lubricant. And just quickly, in relation with this gear, the cam gear has 3 positions. 1, 2, actually just, there you go, and it clicks in here, and it only goes in one direction, and it clicks on the solenoid there. So it's going to be corresponding with this gear here for everything to work the way it should. So I've cleaned up the flywheel surface where the belt runs. There wasn't a lot of dirt on there. That's all clean now. And I just realized on the inside of the flywheel there is these numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, and balancing drill. I'm guessing this will have to go in the exact same position as it came out, and thanks to the video I've just had to watch myself, it came out like this with a balance drill to the west, you could say, or to the left. So this flywheel and this cam gear will have to, everything will have to be assembled in the same position that it came out. Very important. Now using a toothpick, I'm going to lubricate the motor shaft and degrease the motor shaft later as I'm getting some oil on the belt surface. And work it in. And clean up any excess lubricant with cotton buds, and using this stuff here. Yeah, that area there, that's a bit tight for the actual whole cotton bud to go in there. So what I'll do is just pull some of that off into a surface like that where I can actually get into there and clean up the flat belt surface as well, all the way around. There's a little bit of stuff coming off, but the belts haven't melted, so there's not much cleaning involved. Same with that upper pulley, and just slightly cleaned up, well, not cleaned up thoroughly, but slightly lubricate the sliding mechanism that engages the heads. And clean up the excess. Again, using a toothpick, also lubricate the capstan bearing from both sides. And I'm going to lightly lubricate the capstan shaft itself before putting that in. And with that washer that's supposed to be there, I look back at my video and I don't think there was one there. So I didn't lose it, there just wasn't one there. So with the screws missing and that being gone as well, I'm thinking someone was here earlier, but they did not swap the belts. Also capstan bearing from the other side. And yeah, there is a spring just there. So that's lubricated from both sides now, and yeah. I've spun the mechanism around and I'm just going to clean the second pulley. And I think I'll refrain from lubricating those gears. And the plastic's self-lubricating. There's a little bit coming off, but not much. The plastic should be self-lubricating. And adding grease to that might not help. And might cause well and flutter problems with the areas that have more grease or less grease. It might just vary the speed going through the grease patches and increase the well and flutter. And after cleaning up the outer surface of his capstan bearing, not much came off, but yeah, keeping it clean. I just can again confirms my suspicion that someone was in here and left their mark there, literally marking the orientation or the position of this cam gear here with a white marker. And I can't understand why you would go through the trouble of doing all that and not actually replacing the belts unless the person wasn't able to source the belts, maybe. So let's throw that spring back on there, like that. So after cleaning up the capstan shaft, I'm going to give it a bit of a lube using a toothpick again. Not a lot, I've put a fair bit in there already as it is, so I don't need a lot on there. Everything's going to, excess is going to get pushed out onto the other side anyway. And like that, the flywheel can go back into position. And I've looked at my photos again, or looked at the video that I'm shooting now, and that went there at about 9 o'clock. So that's the way I'm going to put it back in. Everything else is all these cam gears are exactly as they were when I pulled it apart. So like that. And the tip of the flywheel the bearing that's in there, that they will have to be lubricated as well before the bracket goes on. Naturally, I've cleaned up the bearing itself here, and the other end at the bracket as well. How I plan to do this is throw the flat belt on as I'm putting on the flywheel, and on the motor as I'm putting the bracket back on, and with a smaller belt I'll install that once everything is back in place. That's what I was able to swap this belt without actually undoing anything on the mechanism before, so I think that would be the easier option than trying to juggle with two belts while putting the bracket back on. And just out of interest, this is the old belt, to see how stretched out it was. If I put the old belt on the flywheel, I've got this about this much play, so it's stretched out a fair bit. The new belt, it looks like it's about the same size as a flywheel. There you go. If I put it on, it stays on there. So no wonder this belt was riding off to the side of the flywheel, and same on the motor pulley. While I've got good access, I've cleaned up the controller thoroughly as well. I'm going to have a go at putting the square belt on as well at the same time, see how I go. Pulling out the flywheel and putting on that square belt where it's supposed to go. If it's not working out, it can be done later. That's on its pulley there almost, like that. The flat belt will have to go on first onto the motor shaft. Because that's how things work. And the flat belt goes on here on the bubbly bit, and that square belt goes in the pulley there. But first, lubricate the flywheel bearing here at the top. And for this I'm going to use grease, and it does not want to stick where it's supposed to, but like that. Okay, let's start by pulling out the flywheel a little bit and getting the hook on it. So that's a hook on it, and onto the motor shaft, onto the convex pulley. Like that. A little bit further across. There. Like that. And now for the second pulley and the second belt. Yeah, I can't see either. Here we go. And that onto the second pulley on the outside, like that. So that's looking like this at this stage. Flat belt on. Needs to go a little bit further down, and this belt's on as well. I'm going to push in the flywheel a little bit. Like that. So looking at the flywheel here, that's spring loaded, so that will come out back like that. Back to those belts at the bottom there. And from this side, this is what it looks like down there. And this belt here, wherever it is, where are we? That wide belt here, that needs to go across to here. That needs to sit across there anyway. Is it going to focus? No. So this is what I'm going to do now. And that's on its right pulley there now. Those belts. You can't see much in there. But yeah, now you can. That belt is on that convex part of the belt, part of the pulley, and the square belt here. And attach the bracket. Screws are saved. As far as the motor bracket itself goes, the prongs go on the inside of the chassis. These two prongs here, and same with that prong there, that also goes on the inside of the chassis. And there's one screw there, two screws at the end of these prongs, and one more screw up the top there, as well as one more below, which is different to all the other screws, and that's for that board there, just there. And of course the square belt has come off, but that wasn't hard to put back on through here. Apparently now it's just a matter of putting the whole thing back together and sorting out any issues that might still have, like speed issues, etc, etc. And this side goes in all the way, ready to be screwed up, but the other side kind of popped out when I was undoing it, and I don't know what was holding it initially, but it's the same story with putting it back in. It's not exactly going in home. And the spring for the door came out. It goes somewhere there. Nice. Okay, so if your spring falls out as well, like here, for me, it goes back on this way and around that as such, I think. And I found some screws to replace the missing screws at the front of the fascia in the corner there. So I've attached the door mechanism on the screws here, springs obviously back on. I've installed the hard to get to screws that were missing inside this area, and I installed the chassis screws from the outside on the corners. There'll be these ones on both sides. still getting a gap here. It's all closed up here. So it looks like you get the bottom in first, where all the heads are and everything, and then everything goes back into place and matches up the top as well. That's the 2 screws inside the cassette wheel. Cassette wheel still works. And now for these 3 screws from the bottom. Try not to damage the board here. I'm supporting it from the other side with my finger, as well as these 2. Ground and a bunch of these wires. And I've replaced all the screws that were missing in this area here with new replacements. And this one's still here, as well as the one in this corner here. So all the screws have been replaced for what was missing. These grey cables can be clipped back in place. So what's happening with the deck now? If you watch the video in the whole, you'll remember that this belt has come off before I could fit the mechanism into back together, I should say. And the gears, I didn't know whether they were still aligned or not, because I've done it back in place like that, with the complete mechanism in place. So let's have a look what it's doing, because I had to re-click it again like I did in the first video on this deck to make it work properly. So that's ready to go. I don't know why I did that just then. Thought there was a tape in it. But now it doesn't think. There we go. So, and what's it doing here? Fast forwarding, stop, rewind. Yeah, okay, still doing it. Now what's it going to do? Interesting. So I might have to reset the cam gear like that. Maybe with this one. And just take the tension off the belt and rotate that gear. So it's kind of slipping without turning anything else. Not driving the belt. And see if that's better. So let's have a look at it now. If I turn it on, it's not trying to play a tape anymore because there isn't one in there. And when I put the tape in there, I better talk over this bit of music because I want to really upload it 3 times, this video. And after one more pulley adjustment there, and this time it did go click, so it looks like it's behaving normally. Turn it off. Yep. Fast forward and rewind. This video has been long enough as it is. I'm going to leave out the details for next part and setting the speed on it and maybe some demagnetizing and so forth. I'll have to do that in part 2 as this video is getting too long. See you in part 2 of this video. Thanks for watching.